Hey, hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day three of LRVS. Hope everybody is doing well. Today, in this track, we will be talking about the accountability model, a simple APM framework, and that will be done by Paul Daoust. And Paul, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate being here at LRVS 22, and happy to be presenting my version of a simple asset performance management framework. Let's dig in. So, what are we fighting against here? So, I like to view the wicked villain as something I call value leakage. Now, in this graphic, we've got our assets, the plant or the facility, with our people, and we have a bunch of inputs. So we've got financial inputs, we've got our CapEx, we've got our OpEx, we've got our energy, we've got our raw materials, we've got our services, our supply chain services and materials, our parts. All of these are investments into our assets. And of course, out the other end, we hope to have a bunch of value come out. So financial value in terms of earnings. We've got customer service. We've got safety. We've got environmental. We've got, our reputation and our services to the global community, our local and/or global community. But look, there's a bunch of value leakage that happens along the way. Our plants aren't always producing, even when they should be. So we've got some availability and some production leakage. We spend more than we need to sometimes. And of course, sometimes we're not as efficient as we should be. These are all different instances of what I call value leakage, which is the difference between where we could and should be in terms of value delivery. You'll see, at least financially here, one of the dollar signs on the right is not colored green, and that's missing, right? So it isn't just about financial, of course, but that value leakage is something worth going after. All right, so let me tell you a story first. So this picture that you see is a boiler feed pump, and it's a high pressure, high temperature, high horsepower, multi-stage centrifugal boiler feed pump set. So years ago, I was leading some work to develop maintenance strategies, and we asked sites to pick your top five asset systems where you either had too high cost, too low performance, or too much risk. And one of the sites selected their boiler feed pumps. And so when we collected the team, we went around and we stated, well, here's what we do already to manage this boiler feed pump. And it was interesting because we went through maintenance, who described their PMs. We went through operations, who said, here's how we operate it. We went to engineering, who was largely responsible for setting the scope of work during turnarounds. We talked to the predictive maintenance folks that said, here's what we apply to predictive maintenance. And we also had a monitoring diagnostic center. So here's our advanced monitoring. And it was interesting because everybody was pretty comfortable with what they decided they should apply to manage this boiler feed pump. And I had to remind them, but wait a minute, you picked this asset for a maintenance strategy review because we weren't happy with its performance and we weren't happy with its cost. So that kind of made us think. And the key takeaway there was this boiler feed pump had 6 or 7 different experiences. Every group was trying to do what they thought was best for that asset, but it wasn't done in a coordinated fashion. And as a result, we were managing this asset very suboptimally, right? And I think that's just an anecdote of sometimes despite the best intentions, we're still not hitting squarely on optimal management of our assets. So I want to talk about asset performance management quickly. So one definition by Gartner here is performance management encompasses the capabilities of data capture, integration, visualization, and analytics tied together for the explicit purpose of improving the reliability and availability of physical assets. That's a mouthful. But I think, in my own words, a few points around what's the job to be done in the asset management practice. We need a visual framework for more better asset management decisions. We need deliberate choices that optimize for cost, performance, and risk all at the same time. My observation is we have cost conversations separately from our performance conversations, separate from our risk conversations. You need to have those conversations all at the same time. We need more effective direction and utilization of what I call our vast and scarce resources. Look, our resources are limited. We have constraints. So in that sense, they're scarce in terms of financial, people, what have you. But they're also vast, right? And we have the ability to allocate and reallocate those resources as we see fit. We want to systematically eradicate that value leakage and create compounding value for our organization. As we solve problems in one area, we can take the benefits of that, give some of it to our stakeholders, but then take the other part and apply those savings to solve problems in other areas. And by doing so, you get the benefits for our stakeholders and the organization. And we want to create an accountability model with the requisite transparency to assure those business results. Right? We talk a lot about accountability, but you can't have true accountability without stark transparency. All right. So cost, performance, and risk. And how do we perceive this? So look, I'm going to go through two principles very quickly. One I call the asset CPR triangle, and that's the principle behind managing that optimal asset cost, performance, and risk. And then we'll talk about the APM framework and how to create and maximize value delivery from that first principle strategies decision making, so that we can have it all. I want low risk, I want low cost, and I want high performance. You can have it all. All right. So first, let's talk about the magic CPR triangle. So again, this goes to managing cost, performance, and risk at the same time. And I'm showing here three bad things or undesirable things. Maybe not bad. They're necessary, but they're not necessarily, you don't want too much of them. So maintenance cost, performance loss in this case, and risk. That's the magic CPR triangle. And the key behind this concept is that there's a dynamic and interrelationship between those three elements, right? And as I said, very often we tend to manage those elements separately. But what we really need to do is look at all three at the same time. So the key to this is resolving expectations versus our capabilities. So what do we need the assets to do? What is it capable of doing? Can it deliver? If not, what are we going to do about it, right? So one of the things is this is a self-resolving dynamic triangle. So if you take the length of each of those sides, and say I want to reduce cost, if I just declare we're going to spend 10% less, then you shorten the cost line, and now there's a disconnect between cost and performance, perhaps, and risk. Now that's assuming, of course, you do nothing different, and it will over time the triangle will actually close its corners again. So if you reduce cost, like if I reduce my budget, then that's all I'm going to spend. It's reduced, 100% likelihood of that. But what's that going to do from our performance loss? Is my performance loss going to grow? Is my risk going to be higher? Yeah, probably it is, right? So, but the key here is that this triangle keeps self-revolving and rationalizing that cost, performance, and risk. The other key to take away here is that what we're really interested in here is the area, right? So the higher the area, the higher the burden, right? So what we want to do is make decisions to reduce the area of that triangle. So if you can reduce your cost, if you can reduce your performance losses, if you can reduce your risks, which risk in this definition is simply the threats that have not yet manifested themselves either in performance loss or maintenance cost, right? So that's really what we're interested in. And I know some people will say, well, we need to balance the trade-offs between cost, performance, and risk. I would say that's not the objective. The objective is to optimize the value. So to have the smallest area for that triangle, right? And again, our decisions, they affect cost, performance, and risk together. We can't ignore that. They are linked. They are intrinsically linked. And we don't do ourselves a service in not having those conversations collectively. So again, this self-resolving triangle, the kind of the words of W. Edwards Deming, your system is perfectly designed to give you the results that you get or that you deserve in the fullness of time, right? So look, and it's all based on our decisions on how we choose to manage these assets. All right. And again, the objective is more value by minimizing that triangular area and reduce that cost of service at an acceptable risk. All right. So this diagram, look, it takes a while to kind of get your head around it. It's called an isoquant diagram. So what we have here is, again, this is actually a visualization of that magic CPR triangle. So on the y-axis, we've got maintenance costs. Again, to have too much is undesirable. And across the x-axis, we have performance loss. Too much is undesirable. So two bad things. You'll notice we have to go into the negative valence here in order to kind of see ours. But in the middle there, we've got current state. But before I talk about that, you'll see the diagonal lines in this. Now, those lines are of equal impact, right? So at our current state, we've got a certain performance or performance loss at a certain cost. That's where we've been evaluated. This, let's call it one asset, is. But from there, where do we go? Right? So what you want to do is drive towards the origin, right? So that's a value gain, right? So, but our decisions, if we decide to do more, to do, an asset investment, then we're going to spend more and we hope to reduce that production loss. But the key question here is, where are you relative to that ISO line? Are you moving towards the origin, which would be a value gain, or are you moving, if you're managing more poorly, then that's the value leakage, and that's that risk that's pulling it out away from the origin, right? So this is a good way to visualize that CPR chart. And look, with our data, largely from our EAMs and CMMSs, as well as our production data, we can plot these fairly easily, right? Now, there is kind of a limit to what we can do. That frontier is an optimized state. And that's really what you're seeking, right? Is to understand where you're going and can you optimize that. But look, you can improve performance at increased cost, maybe. You can improve cost, perhaps at a performance loss increase, right? But it's very, very helpful. So again, these lines are equal impact. So if my engineers, for example, want to spend all this money on the assets, they have to make sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, that the performance improvement is going to more than offset that. So this is where the accountability comes in, right? So if we track that over time, there becomes this kind of path of where this asset's cost, loss, or performance loss and risk go, right? So you can add other things too, right? Besides the maintenance cost and performance loss axis, you can characterize, because this is also kind of a bubble chart, you could have the risk as the size of the bubble, and even you could even use coloring to denote how proactively are we managing that. So if it's very reactive, you might want to color it red. If it's very proactive, you might want to color it green, whatever. Anyway, the point is that we can use these to visualize how well we're managing those assets. So, and if you put a bunch of assets together, so not only can you track these over time, but you can track multiple assets, either a group of individual equipment in a asset management system or a bunch of systems within a production unit or a plant. You can kind of choose at what level that you apply these, but you can see where are the opportunities. And I call this the cost of unreliability, right? And really, again, going with that negative valence, we're trying to look and see where the challenges and the opportunities are. Because if we have high cost, maybe we can reduce that. If we have high performance losses, maybe we can reduce that. If you see kind of the outlier way far away from the origin, you can ask yourself, well, what does it take to move that closer in to the origin, right? And so in order to do this, we want to both preserve and improve, sustain both the cost and the performance together, right? Again, within an acceptable risk to the organization. But by looking at it this way, what we initiate is an optimization mindset, not a satisficing mindset, and that's very, very, very key if you want to improve the overall ability to affect the bottom line of the organization. Right. So this can work at various levels, individual assets, and we can aggregate that up, as I said, to kind of the plant as a whole and have those different views. So it becomes a very, very, very powerful tool to see what's going on in our organization. All right. So next, let's turn our attention to the APM framework. So this is the simple accountability framework to help us optimize those decisions. So I use this in my APM framework, and what I call this, tongue in cheek a little bit, is the island of resolution. And look, we've got operational leaders who see our facilities and plants as kind of one entity. Their definition of asset is something with a profit and loss accountability, and that's usually at the site or business levels, which could have collections of sites, right? And look, they've got a very valid perspective on that. That's the top view, right? The bottom view, the bottom up view, is the practitioner who's whether you're maintenance, operations, reliability, or other engineering functions. We're really challenged and tasked with managing hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of assets individually, right? But it's very, very detailed work, and what we do in that space is also valid, and that perspective is valid. But what I'm trying to do is build this kind of island, this bridge to the middle, where we can break the plant down into a bunch of different systems, say 2-3 dozen systems, and for each of those systems, create that magic CPR triangle and make decisions that ultimately optimize the cost, performance, and risk at every point. So that's the top-down approach from leadership meets the bottom-up approach. And if done well, that creates a safe place to talk about the cans and the wants. Sorry about that. So the wants, of course, is what the leadership needs of the assets. The cans are the capabilities of the assets to deliver on that, and that's the knowledge that the practitioners have. So this middle area provides hopefully that safe space to have those meaningful conversations to resolve those cans and the wants, right? So just some more detail on how that works. Consider as a few workshops. For each of those systems, perhaps periodically, perhaps once a year, we would go through and say, well, what are the business expectations, and what are the asset capabilities? And we have this gap assessment, and you can do that on a general basis. You do that each individually for what performance do we need versus what we're capable of, what costs do we need versus what we're capable of, and what risks are acceptable, and what are the actual known threats, right? And we perform that gap assessment in these workshops, and what comes out of it, the other side, I'm not going to go through all these words, is an asset management plan. So that's the deliverable, which of course is one of the key documents in an asset management system. But because you've gone through this fairly structured process of understanding the expectations and the capabilities in those three arenas, cost, performance, and risk together, now you've got a really rational story to go along with what those business expectations are. And of course, we can track that. right? Another key thing is, how do we go about doing that? If we see a gap, how do we manage that? And every good every good decision stems from good problem solving, right? And I'm an engineer myself. I've never met an engineer who didn't think themselves a good problem solver. But the truth is, a lot of us are, and I've been guilty of this, we're just solutioners, right? We see a problem, and we jump to our favorite solution and promote that, which isn't always the best course of action. So I promote very simple and effective problem solving using the A3 methodology, which some of the audience may recognize from the Toyota way. It's a lean technique. And look, there's a title block at the top, but really it's very simple. A3 is named after the European or metric page size. And the key here is it's all on one page, right? So you've got all the steps of good problem solving, decision making process. You got the problem, you got the current situation, future state, the analysis. We've got the countermeasures, which are the decision and the action. We've got the implementation plan. We've got what value benefits we expect to get out of it, and close it all up. Did we actually achieve what we said we're going to do? And by having this all on one page, this works for the most complex problems in our businesses, and the simple ones as well. And because it's on one page, it forces the users to be very clear and concise about that problem solving and decision making. So the decision makers should be able to see everything on this page and have enough information and knowledge to make a confident and quality decision. Now, for those complex issues, this might be underpinned by a lot of reporting and analysis, and data behind that. But it forces the users to distill that into a clear business message that our leaders can understand and act upon. All right. So that's very, very important. So I want to talk a little bit about asset health and condition, because that, of course, is related to our cost, performance, and risk. And I want to be clear here, this methodology, look, this works for whether you're talking about people and or machines. So, our advanced predictive analytics, machine learning, and AI in that space, it doesn't matter. These fundamentals apply no matter what. And I've got a lot of time for people and or machines, right? And sometimes together, sometimes separately, or the combination thereof. So in a nutshell, if we're going to perform asset health and condition on our assets, I want to know three questions. So answer me these questions three. How much damage is there? How quickly is that damage accumulating? And how much damage can we accumulate before I need to intervene? And that third one's the hardest. So look, those are three simple questions. So in principle, it sounds easy. In practice, it's actually very, very hard, right? So you can see I've got a PF curve on the right-hand side. So, I think the conversation really gets interesting if you start talking about which side of P are you on, right? And if you're on the right side of P and it's declining, it's not a matter of if it's going to fail, it's when it's going to fail. So you better get planning. But if you answer those questions, and as a leader, those are what I want my practitioners to give me in terms of health and condition assessments. You're in a much better state of knowledge to make good decisions. Now, the quality and the rigor of that assessment, there's three different levels to it. There's kind of a nominal qualitative, level 1. There's level 2, basic quantitative, and then there's level 3, advanced. Throw everything at the sink for it. Might be simulation, might be modeling. Certainly when you get to level 2, you're talking about inspections and stuff like that. But the point in this decision making, condition, you need to have both knowledge and uncertainty, right? So we tend to go forward with our decisions with our knowledge. How could we not? But I've learned that just as important as what our knowledge or what we believe to be true is our confidence in that. And that's the uncertainty piece. So I encourage people to, although it's uncomfortable to do so, to admit what we don't know or what we'd like to know, that's every bit as part of the importance of knowledge, is that uncertainty about that knowledge in order to make a quality decision. The other piece of asset performance
Hey,
conditioning.
Paul.
Yep.
I'm sorry to cut you off. So we are right up on the clock. The other sessions are starting right now. I can tell you got a lot of passion.
Oh no.
We had a lot of questions here, which
Oh my gosh.
we can go through offline. But man, thank you so much for your time today. Sorry you didn't get through everything, but I got to give these guys a chance to get to their next.
Yeah,
Track.
my apologies
Hey,
for poor time management on my
that's all
part.
right. That's all right. It happens all the time. But hey, I will say, please, if you're on this, reach out to Paul through the chat section of the LRVS, the website, and you can ask your questions or make any comments you want directly to Paul.
Yeah, please do. I'll be online for a bit here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so
Appreciate
much,
your
Paul.
time.
Bye bye.